definition of the Boston Tea Party. The meaning and definition of the Boston Tea Party 1773. The Boston Tea Party was a pre-revolutionary incident that occurred on December 16, 1773. The Boston Tea Party was a direct protest by colonists in Boston against the tea tax that had been imposed by the British government. Boston patriots, dressed as Mohawk Indians, raided 3 British ships in Boston Harbor and dumped 342 containers of tea into the harbor. The Boston Tea Party arose from the resentment of Boston colonists towards the British, which had been fueled by protest activities by patriots and the Sons of Liberty organization. Declaratory Act. The repeal of the Stamp Act did not mean that Great Britain was surrendering any control over its colonies. The Declaratory Act, passed by Parliament on the same day the Stamp Act was repealed, stated that Parliament could make laws binding the American colonies in all cases whatsoever. Tea Act. By reducing the tax on imported British tea, this act gave British merchants an unfair advantage in selling their tea in America. American colonists condemned the act, and many planned to boycott tea. When British tea ships arrived in Boston Harbor, many citizens wanted the tea sent back to England without the payment of any taxes. The royal governor insisted on payment of all taxes. On December 16th, a group of men disguised as Indians boarded the ships and dumped all the tea in the harbor. On the morning of December 16, 1773, over 5,000 colonists met at the Old South Meeting House to plan the protest of the Tea Act, passed by Parliament on May 10, 1773. The Boston Tea Party was carried out later that evening. Over 100 colonists disguised as Mohawk Indians boarded and raided the 3 docked ships of the British East India Company. The Dartmouth, Eleanor, and Beaver. 342 containers of taxable tea was thrown overboard into the sea.
1773, they boarded the ships and threw the chest of tea into Boston Harbor, ruining the tea. The Tea Party made an iconic event of American history and other protests like the Tea Party movement. The Tea Party is a combination of a resistance movement throughout British America against the Tea Act. It has been passed by the British Parliament in 1773. Colonists objected to the Tea Act because they believed it violated their rights as Englishmen to no taxation without representation, which means being taxed only by their own elected official representatives and not by the British Parliament. There were also not represented protesters preventing the unloading taxed tea in 3 other colonies but Boston. Royal Governor Thomas Hutchinson refused the tea to be returned to Boston.
The history of the Boston Tea Party 1773. Background facts and information. British troops had been stationed in Boston since 1768, and gangs of local workers and sailors often clashed with British soldiers quartered in Boston. Tensions rose, leading to the events of an incident that became known as the Boston Massacre. But problems had been building years before this famous incident, due to the demands made and taxes imposed by the Parliament in Great Britain. There were no American colonists in the English Parliament, which led to the cry of "no taxation without representation" in the colonies. The events leading up to, and therefore the causes of, history of the Boston Tea Party were considerable. The causes of the Boston Tea Party 1773. The serious start of the conflict between Britain and America came at the end of the French and Indian War, 7 Years' War. The war had left the British with a massive war debt, and the British looked for ways of imposing new taxes in the colonies. The British ended their policy of salutary neglect in the colonies, which meant they would strictly enforce laws and taxes in colonial America. The first tax the British imposed was the sugar tax in 1764. More laws and taxes followed. The Boston Tea Party was a symbolic event of the Revolution, but one can speculate with a good degree of certainty that it would not have occurred if not for the series of historic events in Boston and other colonies that preceded it.
Historian Alfred Young, the term Boston Tea Party did not appear in print until 1834. Before that time, the event was usually referred to as the destruction of the tea. Parliament gave the East India Company a monopoly on the importation of tea in 1698. When tea became popular in the British colonies, Parliament sought to eliminate foreign competition by passing an act in 1721 that required colonists to import their tea only from Great Britain. The Townshend Acts were a series of acts passed beginning in 1767 by the Parliament of Great Britain relating to the British colonies in North America. These acts were named after Charles Townshend, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who proposed the program. Historians vary slightly in which acts they include under the heading the Townshend Acts.